And
Ooh.
right.
I have the second phone so I can monitor the live.
Right, of course. And then we will look at OBS. That looks good. So we'll go live here. And all right, we are live on TikTok and Instagram, and we're dueling Instagrams with the 1946 1946 the movie account. And I'm Skeptic Pastor, and
I'm Sharon Roggio.
yeah, right. Go ahead and get that closer to your mouth, because we're also
This
perfect.
is fancy.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous. Wow. We need to get a bigger budget at the 1946 year. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, hey, thank you for coming.
Yeah,
and
cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Oh yeah, we're doing drinks and deconstruction.
Drinks and deconstruction. I love it. I'm
Yeah,
for it.
cheers. And we've got some Doucey cognac, which is yummy. It's also great because it's got a cross on the Bible, so Jesus, I guess, blesses it.
Jesus blesses all the alcohol, I would say, yes.
Right. Okay, so you're the director and you're in 1946, the movie.
Yeah.
If people haven't seen it or heard of it, what can you just give us a 30,000 foot view? What is
The
it
elevator
about?
pitch.
Because it's like two stories. I love how you weave those stories together.
Yeah, so 1946, The Mistranslation That Shifted Culture is a documentary film about the first time the word homosexual appeared in the Bible.
Right.
And what we do is examine how, when people use or misuse ancient text, how it plays out in our real reality.
Yeah.
And so, being a lesbian Christian, growing up in the church, my dad's a pastor, those two things never really mixed. And so I always had a disconnect with the church and with my own reality and my parents and things like that. And then, just after years of struggle or, conflict, I stumbled across Kathy Boldock's research. Okay. And she was the first with Ed Oxford really to ask the question, who made the decision to put the word homosexual in the Bible and why? Right. And what they discovered is amazing. And once I discovered their story, I was like, well, this has to be a documentary. This isn't my opinion. This isn't my feelings. I'm not emotional in how I've been hurt by the church. This is a real translation that we can trace to start a dialogue. Yeah. And so the film really does that. It's non-threatening. It's engaging in conversation so that we can lean more towards love and inclusion in our reality.
Yeah. And so before we get too far, where can people see it?
Sure. So the film is available on Amazon in the US and the UK. We're about to release on Apple TV worldwide and YouTube worldwide. Okay. It's not publicly announced yet because we're still going through quality control. We have about 6 different languages to make it more accessible around the world. And so once we have our official date from our distributor, we'll be able to make that public announcement. But I guess this is kind of the first public announcement. I did put a little hint in our last newsletter. Okay. But you can also watch it on Eventive worldwide, which is a streaming platform for independent filmmakers. And it really has helped launch our film, considering, I've done all the distributing myself. Yeah. And so it was extremely challenging and more challenging than I thought it would be. Yeah. And so trying to find avenues to get the film to the audience was a big challenge. But Eventive has been wonderful. Eventive.org. I can't recommend them more. Yeah.
And I think it's great to know about places like Eventive, because supporting stuff like 1946 is really important. Yeah. It's like, funding important art is like, I don't know. That's important to me, right?
Thank you. Yeah, and right now the movie is a little high. It's at $14.95, and we're going to be dropping that as soon as we're on Apple TV. But it's not cheap to make a movie like this.
No, it's not.
And, we have bills every month and things like that. So thank you to everyone who does rent the film, who has rented the film. It means so much to us, and who continue to support our impact campaign. Me coming out to be able to be here. I'm in Washington, D.C. right now with you. So our film got into World Pride, and being able to be a presence in person is expensive. So thank you to everyone who understands independent filmmaking.
And to say that, to promote films like these, it's not, I mean, I love that you're at World Pride in DC, but it's not just places like this. If you want to like get distribution, like you told me that you just kind of went to Cannes, right?
Right. So I went to the Cannes Film Festival to do some more networking and meet distributors and kind of just learn how the industry is changing.
Yeah.
And especially in the documentary world, streamers are not buying content like this. They're more interested in true crime, in celebrity content, and that's what a lot of the major film festivals are picking up. So social justice films can get played in film festivals, but to get distribution, and let's say it does get distribution, right? Then they're still not marketing your film.
Right.
So it's still up to the filmmakers to find and make sure the audience is aware that it's there, because no one's going to be marketing it for you. So even if we did get on Netflix, they probably, or I don't want to like slam Netflix or any of the other ones, they probably wouldn't have given us a reasonable rate for how much money we put into the film,
of course,
to pay our producers and things, and then we still have to pay our own marketing. So it's a really weird thing. It's like, of course we want to be on worldwide Netflix, but then
for sure,
how do you let the audience know that it's there?
Yeah, and that's, I think, also why it's important for people to follow you on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and all of the places that people follow you. I don't know if you have Facebook. I'm not on Facebook.
Yeah. We're at 1946 the movie across all social media platforms. And then to find the links to watch the film, 1946themovie.com is our website. Very easy to find.
So let's talk. I want to talk a little bit about what's in the movie. But like I said, there's these two stories that you put together, right? The relationship with your dad, who's this evangelical pastor, and this research. Like, we see you go to Yale, like we see you in California, and in like these the Reform Conference, all of these really important places, and we get to see, and I got chill bumps like seeing the document that is like this pivotal document in the whole thing. So let's start with the academic side. What did we find there? Because I remember it was years ago. I mean, like a long time ago, I saw the first article about Ed.
Yep.
And his...
In the Forge. It was the Forge article.
Yeah, the Forge article about Ed and what he had found in these older translations of the Bible, and it blew me away. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So as the director of the movie, first of all, I never thought I'd make a movie about the Bible, a documentary about the Bible and two Greek words being translated. We're in conferences, we're at church. We're in churches. We're talking about the Bible, which some people love, some people hate. Whether you love it or hate it, it impacts your life.
Yep.
And so how do you make a movie that is engaging, that's not that it's fun content, but fun to watch, and enjoyable to watch, that once that you want more. And so I really wanted to make a discovery type film, something that almost like the Da Vinci Code documentary.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Just like you said, when they discovered these archives. So when Ed and Kathy first gave me that footage, because they started this work before I asked if I could do the movie, they were at Yale University when they found the letters that proves that the Bible was mistranslated, and the translation committee admitted they made a mistake.
Right.
And so they are reading this letter, and we have it in the film in real time when they were there. And I'm so proud of them for having the whereabouts to record everything.
Right.
They had a documentarian with them who was a friend of Ed's, and they were really just there to take videos and photos of the documents.
Yeah.
But Ed was doing videos outside. We're at Yale University. We're doing this, and the next morning, Kathy and Ed this stuff's not in the movie, but they're outside and like, it's day 2. We're getting ready to go again. And so they were really just documenting their time. And so, and the best thing is they did it all on an iPhone, which is crazy, and
That's wild.
They're in the microfilms at Yale University. And when we got the footage, you could hear the whoosh,
You're
of
kidding.
the microfilm, right?
Wow.
And our sound designer got rid of all of that, But the most impressive thing was the camera guy, who isn't really a professional documentarian, just a friend of Ed's. The framing was perfect. Like, it couldn't have been better. He held the camera the right way, and you could see Yale, a sign of the Yale microfilms in the background, and just, it was perfect. Some of the footage was just all on the screen, so we had to like kind of play around, but it was gold to me. It was like cinema gold. I literally cried. And as I was saying earlier, like, this isn't it doesn't become my feelings anymore. This is a tangible piece of evidence, and it's such a strong moment in the film.
Right.
And
what is that piece of evidence that they find? So
Sure.
we're talking about the translation of the Revised Standard Version.
Correct.
Right? There's
Correct.
a committee of white men that are smarty pants, right? Very smart, that are translating from the original languages
Yep.
to English.
Yep.
And they choose to translate arsenokoitai and malakoi as homosexual.
Correct.
But Ed and I just lost her name.
Kathy
find they're looking at their records of the like notes and letters
Yep.
that people got, right?
Yeah, there were like 90,000 pages of notes, and then the microfilm. I mean, it was just a massive pile of paperwork to go through.
Yeah.
And they found so like interesting things in there, letters, and Dr. Weigel, who was the head of the translation committee, would write people back. And one woman who wrote was like, I'm living in a community where we have a poll tax and I can't afford it. So I'm not able to go and vote. And this is voter suppression.
Right.
And I really don't have the power to do anything about it, but you do, sir. Can you help me?
Wow.
And he wrote her back and he's like, absolutely, this is not just, and we will do something about it. You know, I mean,
That's
like
wild.
They found birthday cards, they found, old checks and just different random
Yeah.
stuff, and but what they were really looking to find is some sort of explanation as to how and why they made this decision.
Right.
And they weren't finding anything until they went into the microfilms, and then they found a series of letters. And what it was a 21-year-old, we didn't know he was 21 at the time.
Right.
Seminary student. They assumed he was some sort of theologian or studying because he could write the Greek language in the Greek. And
make
he-
like
a solid
educated
argument.
arguments, right, about
Absolutely.
why this is. Yeah.
It was a 3-page letter with an appendix citing all of his sources.
Wow.
And reasoning behind it. It was
Yeah.
it was wildly academic and way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Especially once we found out who it was.
Right.
It really is remarkable letter. And all of the letters will be posted in Kathy Boldock's upcoming book,
Oh, that's
Forging a Sacred Weapon: How the Bible Became Anti-Gay. So you can see
I can't wait to
unless
read that.
you go to Yale University, there's no other way to see and go into the archives yourself. But so in the series of letters, he challenged the translation committee saying, this is wrong and why.
Yeah.
Dr. Weigel wrote him back and said, I see your point. Would it be more malleable to you if we used those who practice homosexuality? you
Right.
know? And David's like, thank you very much, but no,
Wow.
these are vices.
I
This
know.
is not about practicing homosexuality.
Right. And because this is, he's writing this, 1950?
59 is
Yeah.
when he wrote the letter. Yeah.
And so there was like, for
Years
people who
before.
didn't live back then, right? Like it wasn't gay people. They weren't thinking of gay people like it was. Like they had these crazy, like, beware of the homosexual, right? Like there was this like homosexual predator narrative.
Absolutely.
And this guy was saying, no. Yes, I'm sure there are people who are predatory.
But they're not necessarily homosexual.
But that's not
A lot of the
homosexual,
predators
right?
are not homosexuals.
And so that's the vices. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A way to like,
Yeah, and that's just the language
it-
of the time
yeah.
too, And so, and what Dr. Weigel's team was actually looking to do was modernize the text.
Yeah, right.
And so the Malakoi is the passive participant in this particular sex act, and the arsenokoitai is the active
Right.
participant. And so they looked into the culture and they saw, okay, there's a new term because homosexual was a relatively new term.
Yeah.
And our understanding of heterosexuality and homosexuality was still evolving.
Yeah.
And at
Yeah.
that time, homosexuals were still considered to be mentally ill.
right.
And
I mean, there was
deviant.
like a DSM classification.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so, once they got this letter, Dr. Weigel was able to recognize, okay, we're not talking about a group of people
Right.
with an orientation. We're talking about an act that has a victim on the other side.
Right. Yeah.
And so when they were able to update their translation,
Yeah.
they voted 7-3 to change the word from homosexual to sexual pervert, which is still a bad translation.
Right.
They finally have. Since then, my phone is dying. So
Oh no,
I
it's
just lost
okay.
it. I know.
Oh no. Okay. Do we need to plug it in? We
Yeah,
can
hold
do
on one
that.
second. I got it.
Okay. I've got. Is that USB-C or Lightning?
No, I got a lightning.
Okay.
Hold that thought.
Hold that thought. Yeah, we will. The podcast. We'll edit all this out. For those of you who are just joining us, though, we are getting to talk to the director of the 1946 of the movie, Now we're back live on all of the platforms and your account and my account.
And my account.
Okay, so
we were talking
about how
voting 7-3.
Yeah, 7-3, and then
but basically what happened though is they weren't able to update their translation until the 70s. They released it
1978 or 79.
They released it in 73, I believe. But so they found this. The letter came to them in 1959.
Okay.
So prior to that, no one was really even looking at this homosexual thing. You know, and this was the only letter that they really found in the archives discussing this. There was one other Canadian who challenged it in a postcard, but it was very little. You know,
Right.
and so people were more concerned that the RSV team, which was the most academic team out there, they did something. They took the virginity of Mary away, according to the evangelicals, because they called her a young woman, which is actually more original to the Greek.
That's correct.
And they also took the divinity of Christ away by saying, surely this must be a son of a God, instead of the God. You know, and so that's what people were in an uproar about. And the RSV got a very bad reputation, was deemed a communist Bible, and banned by the U.S. Navy. I mean, there was a guy who did a whole propagated campaign against it. It's wild, but what happened was the translation committee was in a contract not to update their translation for 10 years.
Right.
So they couldn't do anything about it. So it just sat in the archives. Meanwhile, 3 other English translation committees in the 60s wanted to make their version of the English Bible and put those things back in. And they all used the RSV as their root text.
Yes.
And then inserted the word into 6 different passages where it just doesn't belong. So it started to spread.
And that was the NIV, the Living Bible, right? And then ESV, right? Is that correct?
It wasn't the ESV. No. It was the NASB, I think.
Yeah, New American Standard Bible. Yeah.
And the NIV and the Living Bible. And the Living Bible was the worst because it's a paraphrased Bible, so it's not even academically correct. And so it's very frustrating history when you see that. And would the LGBTQ community have been handled differently?
Yeah.
Possibly. You know, we see then in history where once the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, declassified homosexuals from being mentally ill, that's where we see the church switch from it being a mental disorder to a moral issue.
Right.
And that's where we can see, Kathy did a whole study on the Pastoral Council magazines and looked into what were the pastors saying about this from the 50s to the 80s.
Yeah.
And she couldn't find anywhere in there where they said it was a moral issue until after 73.
Yeah.
And then that's when they started to turn it into a sin issue and a moral issue. And, once we started to get liberated.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And, and now the New Revised Standard Updated Edition, those 2 passages in the New Testament, it says men who engage in illicit acts.
Right, and that's where I was going before the live cut off. I apologize.
No,
yes,
you're fine.
And so the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition, they continue to update and improve the translation, and now they have it says illicit sex amongst men, which forces the reader to think, what's illicit and with whom? What's really going on here? Again, this is not about consensual, loving, mutual relationships. This has to do with power, dominance, and all of those other notions that we talk about in the film.
Well, yeah, and the word illicit is helpful because it makes it subjective, right? So what was illicit at that time may not be considered illicit by modern culture. And I really appreciate that it makes it more flexible and gives you the sense of what it was then, right? It was not it has evolved and it will continue to evolve.
Yeah, Eugene Peterson actually has a really interesting translation as well. Those who use and abuse sex, those who use and abuse others.
Yes,
so he
I love
really
that.
got it. He understood what was going on there, And just also for the audience as well, I know we talk about pederasty in the film and we talk about some of the other things that it could be. Pederasty which is sex with young boys, basically. It was men having sex with young boys, was very prominent during the time. And that could be one way it could be translated. But but it doesn't translate to pederasty. It doesn't translate to boy molester. Boy molester is also a bad translation. This has everything to do with power over people. And if you were a man in high society or a person in high society, it was men,
Right.
you could essentially penetrate anyone lower than you.
Right.
Anyone who was of a lower class, be it woman, child, enslaved person. And the reason they wouldn't do this to the young girls is because the girls had to be virgins when they were married off.
Right.
So they would just do this horrific act to the young boys.
Right.
But it doesn't translate to pederasty. That's not a good translation, which is why we put in the film at the end, illicit sex amongst men. The new revised standard version would be the one that we would recommend.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the sort of academic consensus, is that the most accurate English translation on the market right now is the new revised standard updated edition. So that's that side of the movie.
Yes.
That sort of those threads that weave through. And then if I'm right, does the movie opens with you reading a letter from your dad, right?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I've been personally impacted by this, and my dad being a pastor. And so I knew how to work the nuance with this, with the church and my own experience, and then now finding this amazing piece of evidence, trying to put it all together. And so our team interviewed about a half a dozen people in the world to see who we can utilize as an example of how this mistranslation plays out in our real lives.
Right. Yeah.
We didn't know it was going to be me and my dad until my dad showed up. And once he signed the release form and said he would participate, we knew it had to be our story because it was just too good. My dad is just too good of a character. And also, we represented his side fairly.
Yeah, he really did.
Yeah, thank you. And we really prided ourselves on that. And a lot of, him even being in the film took a lot of trust.
Yeah.
That shows how strong our relationship is, as far as like knowing that we're not bad people. We're not trying to vilify anyone. I'm not trying to, I made an academic journalistic film, and that was my intention the entire time, to stay true to being a journalist. But this afforded us the opportunity. I'm so grateful that my dad said yes.
Yeah.
It afforded us the opportunity to show the other side, and to show, more importantly, to show how we're doing relationship with one another, and how we're having conversations with one another. Are we staying in relationship? And then also how frustrating those relationships can be. And it's like the magnets that don't connect. You can feel that that pull there.
You really could. And I don't know. When you say it's an academic journalistic film, yes, except that I was weeping.
Yeah.
Right? Because of my own experience with all of this, because of this community that I'm part of, called Not Church, that has lots of queer people in it that have experienced this, because of the stories that are like poured out online when I talk about queerness and the Bible and all of the trauma that we've experienced. You came out when you were young.
So going back to the letter, I was found out. Yeah. So my dad read my diary. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen the film, and so that was pretty traumatic, as you can imagine. Having him call me out basically for being queer. And that took a real toll on our relationship. Yeah. And I'm not my story's not unique. It's unique to me, but unfortunately these things are and in defense of my dad, not that it's completely wrong to read anybody's diary, but he really believed that queer people would not inherit, homosexuals do not inherit the kingdom of God. So even just identifying as being gay put me outside of the kingdom. And so he was genuinely concerned for my eternal soul. Right. I mean, weeping and just really, really upset. And so, I forgive him. I know why he did it. It still was wrong. He admitted it was wrong. And he probably wouldn't do it again. I don't know. We'll see. But it does show, love there. And we were mentioned at the World Pride screening the other day, the Q&A. I've seen my dad progress and change, where he now believes that people could be born gay, but you still have to put that aside, pick up your cross, and marry somebody of the opposite sex or remain celibate. Really, those are your choices. But that's growth, honestly. Like he can, just even getting that little bit of a switch makes a difference. And I hope that he continues to grow, and I hope that other people can see that as an example and take it as a step for their own growth. Yeah, and I don't know so he wrote you a letter, and I don't know. I am sure this was intentional, but there was at the beginning
of the movie, you've got the text of the letter and the text of the Bible.
Yeah.
And it's the way you present it visually. We're seeing that like this text is like behind the text that you receive.
Yeah.
Right. Including, I mean, he quoted the Bible. And that has to be incredibly hard. And somehow, I know many people whose relationship with their parents did not survive stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what happened? Like, and I would never argue for someone to like stay in a very abusive, traumatizing relationship. But I know a lot of queer people who would love to hear somebody else's story about how they're still in a relationship, even though, I mean, like, you are both on the opposite sides of this thing. So, like, I'm curious, like, when you go back to that moment, like, you left for a little while, how did that relationship not sever forever?
Yeah. So it was really my decision to go back, and I went back for a couple different reasons. The first reason is, and you're right, if you're in a situation where you're constantly being berated, abused, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, run away and don't go back. You know, my parents weren't deliberately doing this. As I was saying earlier, like they really believed that I was not going to inherit the kingdom of God. These are their beliefs, and they were fearful. They went through a mourning process.
Yep.
They went through a grief counseling and things like that. This is stuff that I learned later, and so I went back years later because I didn't want to be someone that is talked about.
Right.
I want to be somebody that is known to my nieces, my nephews, my cousins, and being estranged from your family is really difficult.
Yeah.
And so I decided to be the bigger person, even though they weren't a lesser person. They really just, again, it's just a difference of beliefs and a point of view. And so I forgave them and just said, let's try to do relationship as much as we can. And so we navigated that together. Okay, I need help with college. Okay, come back home. Well, I won't live at home, but I'll live near home, that kind of stuff. And so we just started to work the pieces together, and then I would show up and just be me, so that, again, I'm not just somebody that's talked about. You can have a relationship with me and then have my extended family come to their own conclusions. But then also I wasn't spending Christmases alone anymore and things like that, But it doesn't make it any easier when you go back, because you still have to, as a queer person who's not accepted by your family, put parts of you aside.
Yeah.
And so I'm still not, and we talk about this in the film, we still don't have a full relationship. They don't know anything about my life. They don't know anything about my friends. They don't know anything about what I do every single day. We don't have a weekly phone conversation. It's just, it's very surface, but it's still love,
Yeah.
And so that's why I went back. But again, if your parents are unable to be mature and just do relationship.
Yeah.
So when we're together, my mom and I cook, and we love sharing recipes together, and we have fun cooking. My dad and I, we don't really do things together, but sometimes we do. He likes real estate, so I'll go and look at a house with him. And we just do things without talking about the thing.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes we'll have conversations, but especially after making the movie, they know where I stand.
Yeah.
And so if they just see me for who I am, hopefully that can make a difference.
Yeah.
I don't need to continuously say, oh, I learned this and oh, I learned that. Some of my friends wish that I challenged them a little bit more.
Yeah, of course.
Especially on the issues of Christian nationalism, which is really prominent in our country and a huge problem.
Yeah.
But I've decided to just let it go, and I pick my battles on TikTok and the Instagram, and if they want to watch it, great. I sometimes post on my personal Facebook so they can see some of that stuff too. And then just go home and have Christmas,
Yeah. As I'm listening to you, there's there feels like there is an emotional intelligence on both sides of the table, right? Where listening to you talk about how they were honestly concerned about the eternal destination of your soul. And as much as I just want to smack somebody who believes that, sometimes like it's deep. It's actually empathy. There's actually emotion behind, positive emotion behind it. That they really are wanting the best for you. And I think that, so it's interesting to me to hear you say you can see that. And on the other side, like sometimes it's not that, right? Sometimes it's just hate.
Yeah.
Right. And so there is, and I'm not a psychologist. I don't know how it all works, but I've seen both sides of it. And some people, it's just hate. And so, but on their side, because it's love, I feel like it feels like when I'm hearing your story, I'm not talking to your parents, but they're also wanting on their side to come forward, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and they do the best that they can,
right?
So
I don't know if I've got friends who I could just imagine in the room with us right now, who are in a similar situation. Their parents, love them and say really horrible things out of this weird, oddly positive emotional space. If those people were here, what would you say to them? Like how do they reconnect, or what's a first step?
Yeah, I mean, if your parents are saying negative things still, that's really hard, because then you're not just putting yourself back into an uncomfortable situation. You're putting yourself back into a situation where you're going to get hit. You're not physically, but mentally, emotionally, abused. Right. And that's never good. Right. So if that's the case, then you have to put on extra armor.
Yeah.
And again, just show up to not be someone that's talked about, but someone that's known. Right. And hopefully your presence can help make a difference in their life. But it's not up to us. It's a shame that it's always up to us then to be the bigger person, or try to start these conversations or change the relationship. So if it's unhealthy, don't do it. I would recommend.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about you. How did you approach that? Because your dad has made a progression, and I'm sure like when you first showed back up, it took a while to navigate what are the guardrails.
Yeah.
Like, how did you do that? Did you have to say like, we're not talking about this, or?
It's kind of like just a known thing. Uh-huh. Yeah. It's like, we don't talk about it. It's just a known thing. And they were just so happy to have me back that, they didn't want to disrupt me. As a matter of fact, I found out that my mom was furious when I left, furious at my dad. She's like, you go get her back, kind of thing. And so it was really hard on everyone.
Yeah.
And so, I'm willing to walk with them through this.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. But it doesn't make it any easier. I mean, even, trying to have phone conversations sometimes, it's like there's only so many conversations you can have about the weather.
Right. No, for sure.
So.
And like, I'm sure there's a grief to it. Like, it's sort of ongoing grief, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, like, I'm engaged now. Two of my sisters have declined coming to the wedding. I invited all my sisters, and they immediately declined. Like, I can't do this, One of them at least was nicer than the other. And then one sister is going to try to come. She's the one who's not blurred out in the film. And she's been super supportive, which is great. That's great. So it's nice to have that. And even my other sisters, they just are a product of the upbringing. And, so we just try to do relationship. But it hurts. It's like, I would love for my family to be there. So I didn't even invite my parents, knowing that they're not going to come. Right. My dad can't travel anyway. He's been sick. And so that's unfortunate. But they wouldn't come. And so I just didn't need to get the rejection.
Yeah, right.
And
so like sometimes it's self-care, not asking, not engaging in it, right?
Yeah, correct. And so, and then setting up your own boundaries but then you still have that miss where you're not really in full relationship. And,
Yeah.
you know, my dad is still I've never said my fiance's name to my father. He knows I'm getting engaged. My mother's mentioned her name once, you know. And
Right.
so it's still this thing. They're still hopeful that I will become straight.
Yeah.
And so they're not really happy for me when I'm at the happiest I've been in my life.
Yeah.
So that's really hard to deal with. But we're going to have an amazing wedding in Tuscany.
Oh, wow.
And,
That's wonderful.
It's going to be a blast. So
Yeah.
I couldn't be happier.
Oh, I'm so happy for you. So when you are, so you grew up as a preacher's kid.
Oh, yes.
You went to all of the church things. I'm sure you were in, I'm sure you did things like Bible drills and went to vacation Bible school.
I buried the purity ring somewhere.
Oh.
I have no idea where. I wrote a letter to my future spouse and had a purity ring, and I buried it. So it's somewhere in New Jersey. If anybody finds it, you know. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is wild. So, you get to this place. You come out to yourself. You have a diary where you're like recording all of the things, and then all of this happened. Like you've walked this like long road from childhood to adulthood, now being engaged. What happens spiritually, right? Because, I mean, I don't know. Whenever I found out that the Bible had been completely messed up, whenever I found out all these random things about the inaccuracies and that kind of stuff, it shook my faith. It shook my faith, broke pieces off that I'll never have again. I don't want anymore. But took me to a completely different place, like spiritually speaking, a more open place. But how did that work for you? And I don't mean as a child, like now, like you've now probably been in more churches than almost any Christian in the world showing this film.
Yeah.
Right? To thousands and thousands of pastors and church leaders, right? At big conferences.
I've met more gay Christians around the world than I can even, or like affirming churches. I mean, we've been to Taiwan, Hong Kong, Bangkok. We went to Singapore. We've been to Paris. We've been to Belgium. We've been to the Netherlands. We've been to London. We've been to Canada, all over. We played in every province in Canada, you know, and I've been to most of these screenings.
Yeah.
And it's just remarkable to see people still being able to maintain their faith and or being able to walk away with it, knowing that, you know, we're not damaged,
right?
That the religion is damaged. And so this is an institution problem is what I've learned. And I kind of always knew, I just didn't really have the language or the skills or the knowledge to put behind it. I knew at a very early age that there was a fundamental issue with the ideas I was being presented.
Yeah, right.
And it didn't really represent what I was seeing in the Gospels.
Right.
Like there's a big disconnect here.
Yeah.
Then, of course, I was found out. I left home and I completely left the religion behind. I wanted nothing to do with it.
Which is the standard story, right?
I hadn't been to church in 20 years.
Right.
And once I started going back to church, I was in Los Angeles in a progressive church, and I was like, okay, well, maybe...
What church? Shout out.
I'm not going to shout it out.
Okay,
because
we won't.
I'm not a big fan of them. They're no longer... Because when I started going there, you know, I'm like, this church is supposed to be, you know, I was like, oh, maybe I'll fit in here.
Right.
And what I found out, it was just... it was almost worse than something like my father's church because they were making you. It's like the bait and switch, making you feel like
we love everybody's welcome, but we're not going to marry you.
But you're right. So we're not equal. We're still not equal. Yeah. And so I was like, this is bullshit. Like, you know, can we curse on this channel?
Yeah, no, you can do it totally.
And
all of our interviews end up with the explicit tag. We're fine.
And I was furious. Actually, I was actually like, this is worse because you're lying to us. You're lying to your congregation. I did a deep dive. I found an old sermon that the pastor had talked about all the clobber passages and challenged him on it. And then that video disappeared. Once he knew I was making a documentary, which I wish I downloaded it. But anyway, I didn't. And they don't need to be. It's not about that church, you know. It's just more about like the you know, they'll welcome the gay people, and I can volunteer.
Yep.
I can serve, but I can't lead, you know?
Yep.
And so that really started me on this journey to really re-examine the scriptures and to challenge the church and what you call sin, I don't call sin.
Right.
And that led to me meeting people in the church who had the same opinion and had felt the same thing and were going through, you know, queer Christians that were going through the same thing. And it was my friend Tracy who told me about Kathy Boldock.
Yeah.
And so a month later, I was at a church, another church down the street in LA, where they were teaching a class on Malakoi and Arsenokoitai. And I'm like, what the heck is this? Now, meanwhile, this is prior to the 1946 thing exploding. So it was just this class on homosexuality and Malakoi and Arsenokoitai, but they still didn't talk about the RSV or anything. And I'm like, this is really interesting. And then that's where I learned about Kathy Boldock. So I went home that night. This is the summer of 2018, and binged watched Kathy Boldock for like 6 hours.
Like
and
you
I was
two,
like,
we're just going back to back
all night long. So then the next day I called my friend Tracy again, and I was like, this is incredible. She's like, well, I'm actually getting Kathy to come and talk at the United Methodist Church at Hollywood and Highland, which is a very iconic church in Hollywood.
Huge.
And she's going to be here on this date. And I was like, stop it. That's the same day my parents are coming to town. And so I'd already kind of that summer decided I was going to really challenge the church and everything I was going through before even learning about Malakoi and Arsenokoitai. And I'm a filmmaker. I'm going to make a documentary on affirming theology, which is a new term to me too, you know? And I'm like, I don't know what it's going to be about, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So then I hear about Kathy Boldock, and I'm like, okay, well, my parents are coming into town, and so is Kathy. And I already said I want to make a documentary. So I asked the church, Kathy. I didn't know who Ed was at the time. He was speaking with her. I got permission from everyone, permission from my parents, hired a film team with my own money, and filmed it. So that's, you see in the movie, is me, my dad, and my blurred out mom. My mom is great, but she's like, this is between you and your dad, so leave me out of it.
I love that. That's so sweet. That is great.
Right. So we blurred out my mom's face. And so we're sitting in this conference now in person with Kathy Boldock as she's talking about patriarchy, penetration, and procreation for 8 hours with my mom and dad next to me. But that's when I learned about the 1946 mistranslation. So Kathy, a couple years earlier, had discovered, you know, the 1946 mistake. Well, she assumed it was a mistake. She just knew it was the RSV team and wanted to do more research. She started talking about it. Ed Oxford was in one of her talks a couple years prior. This is like 2016. And heard that and was like, wow, this is fascinating. So he started buying old Bibles, lexicons, dictionaries to see what was really in there. That's where we have the amazing Bible collection. And that's how actually Ed and Kathy became friends, because Ed was stalking Kathy and, like, you know, following her at conferences. Can I get you coffee? Can I help you? Oh, by the way, when you're in California, I have this really nice book collection. Wink, wink, come over and take a look. So she did. And she like shooed him to the other room. She's like, give me a bottle of wine and leave me alone. But then they became friends and started working together. And so Ed was the one who discovered that the archives, that all of the archives of the RSV were at Yale University. So he told Kathy, and Kathy's like, I'm going with you. And that's when they went together in 2017 to the archives and discovered these letters. And then it was in 2018, about a week before I met them, maybe a month, that they had found David, the young seminary student who wrote the letter. He was he's now since died. He died in 2023. But then he was in his 80s, you know, and it took about 8 months for them to find him. And it was really quite a difficult process. But because he signed the letter with his first name and his middle name, and some of the other clues as far as where the letter came from, him being a seminary student. You know, we had a woman called Tina Tina Wood do this amazing detective work. And she found him. So Kathy Boldock calls him one morning at 9 a.m. She gets his phone number, you know, hello. And she's like, did you write a letter to the translation committee, RSV, you know, in 1959? This is not a prank call. Don't hang up, you know? And he was like, yes, you know? And she's like, well, I found that letter. Do you have a copy of it? No, you know? And they just started this relationship. And so I'm in that conference and they're telling everybody this story and my jaw is just dropped. I'm like, this is what the documentary is about.
This is it.
You know, in 1946, like this is everything. You know? So...
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question in just a second about, like, what would you say to people like your dad who have queer kids? But before we do that, I want to ask you, I love films. I lived in LA for a little bit. Like, so I want to know if, I hope everybody is going to go out and go on Amazon, pay whatever, watch 1946, invite their friends over, pop popcorn, have some beer, whatever it is, and cry. Just be prepared. Also have tissues.
And you'll laugh too. There's good moments in the film.
For sure. It's just powerful. But as a filmmaker, there's all kinds of beautiful things that you do that makes it the difference between making a video and making a film.
Yeah.
There's the art.
Yeah.
So as people are watching, if they are not well versed in this art form, what are some things that they might pay attention to notice that will help them realize, oh yeah, like help them see the connection or see the art in the film?
I mean, so we've got great animation, we've got great graphics. Our editor was incredible. And so that made all the difference, I think. But really, the music, Mary Lambert did all the music. So, and that's the fun stuff, the creating part, you know, and seeing it come together and seeing, you know, my vision, my clear vision be put, you know, it was pretty amazing. Hold that thought because of my thing. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
What's going on with my phone over here? It came unplugged. Now I get to be really up close with your audience. There we go. Come on. For some reason, the charger stopped. Hello, everyone. Okay. No, so the art part's really fun. I think, you know, from a filmmaking perspective, what we really wanted to do and what our editor was really good at is providing breaths for the audience.
Yes, right.
And she also was really good at connecting each scene. They really played on top of each other really well.
Right.
And so it just kind of just naturally just keeps going. And there's no like awkward pause or no like slow moment. And that just is the sign of a good storyteller.
Right.
Honestly, Jill Woodward is her name. If there's any filmmakers out there, hire Jill Woodward. She's incredible.
Yeah.
But our whole team was amazing. Jenna Serbu is our producer. She and I have been working together for years. And so she knows my story. She's the one who's in the beginning of the film with the hat who questions me. And so we did that. We basically, when we put me and my dad in the film, it afforded us an opportunity to kind of fill in some of the gaps and use me as a narrator in some moments. But, you know, I'm not a in front of the camera person, right? So every time I was trying to do the narration, it sounded like a Discovery Channel film, you know? And I'm like, Jenna's like, this is horrible. She's like, you do so well on the podcast.
And now
You're
observe
natural.
the father.
Exactly, you know? And she's like, but every time you try to talk, you just can't break out of this, you know? And I'm like, I don't know how to do it, you know? So she's like, let's just set up like we're doing an interview.
Yeah.
And we just decided to film it. And we ended up, you know, and one of the things too that Jill said is if I'm going to be in the movie, I can't really be sat down. You know, you don't really interview yourself in your own documentary, you know?
Sure.
And so we had to kind of skillfully play with that. So she still had a hard time at first with the opening scene.
Right.
And we're like, no, I think this is going to work. And we ended up working through it, and it ended up working really well. Because it just brings the audience right in there. You see me coming up to a GoPro on the set, you know, and it's just like, and we're like, okay, we're going to do this. And we're nervous. And we're like, just trying to figure it out. And then boom, we just get right into the story. And it does help. Again, then as we're going through the different pieces, now you're familiar with me. You know that I'm part of the story, and then I can help fill in those gaps. And it worked beautifully. So it was kind of a happy accident, that whole part, because it was tricky to put all the pieces together, as you can imagine.
Yeah, and you know, I think one of the things that you do really well, or that you, the whole team, right, that the film does really well, is being able to very quickly make us understand you're making this movie. You're also telling the story about yourself. And part of the story that you're telling, it's not just the story of you coming out and all that stuff. It's the story of you discovering these people who found this thing. And I don't know, it was very quick, and it was well done because, like, you know, again, you have the meta view with you can see all the stuff, which feels very like, okay, I see. I understand what this is, right? It was beautifully done. And then, like what you said, like the beats that the editor put in there, like it was just right when you needed to like hang on, I want to process that for a second. There was a moment to just let your brain process through, and it wasn't boring. It wasn't too much. It just happened.
Like the cat in the scene after my dad and I have that awkward situation. The cat's just like, and everybody always laughs, and it's just like so awkward.
It was the cat. That was the cat. There's two cats, I think.
Yeah,
but it was great. It was perfect because it was a tense. It was a hard scene to watch.
Yeah,
because clearly you guys are at odds and also love each other, and so there's like this, like, I don't know, relational tragedy in that scene, and then you're like, and then this cat's like, what the hell? Like,
another thing that Jill was really good at, we had a lot of mixed media in the film, and I'm not a cinematographer either. Right. I'm not in front of the camera. I'm the producer, know, and so. And if you don't, it's either time or money. And if you don't have money to hire people, you have to do it yourself. So I wore so many hats on this film, and I started filming on my own. And so I literally, and even like the first time we filmed Reverend David at the Q Fellowship Conference, I went with a group of volunteers, and none of us knew how to work the equipment that I just bought. So we're literally on YouTube the night before trying to figure it out. So that's why there's a lot of GoPro clips in there, because I would be on set by myself trying to do sound, do lighting, figure out temperature on the camera, setting up everything, then trying to get my interview in order. Like, it was a lot. And so I just had GoPros everywhere just in case a camera went out or the audio went out, and I had backup. So I at least had something. Yeah. And I did that for a while to build a trailer. But we ended up using some of that footage, including the iPhone footage. And so the footage that Kathy and Ed used. And then later we had our professional team when we were able to hire people. And we had professional cameras. So there were 8 different cameras at least. Yeah. And they're all very different. And so introducing that camera language early on. Oh, and the drone footage too. We ended on that drone shot out, which is like a really odd way to end the film. You never really want to like come out like that, but it ended up just being a perfect way to end. A beautiful shot. The end sequence is my favorite part of the movie, by the way. When we have David's wrap up. If you haven't seen the movie, just wait. It's so good. And so ending on that drone shot was a deliberate choice. And so we wanted to introduce the drone language throughout the film as well too, so it didn't seem so jarring. Yeah.
For me, when I saw that, and I know it's meaning for art is often in the eye of the beholder, but for me, as the drone is pulling out, it starts pretty close, and then it gets further, and it keeps going until David's really small. Yeah. And I remember feeling like, oh yeah, it's just, we're this blip on this huge earth in the middle of time, and like, while it is hard and very personal, it felt to me like it gave some context, like some relief of like, oh wait, no, there's a bigger thing happening, right? I'm part of these small people on this giant thing. I don't know, that there was a, like, for me, there was like a being able to take a breath at the end that gave me when I saw the movie. Okay, so
what was your other question though about the kids?
That's what I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
So, okay, your dad, he sort of is the stand-in in the movie for all of these more fundamentalist, evangelical, conservative theology people, and I've walked with what a pastor thing to say. I have been with kids who came out to their family and they told them, either you go through conversion therapy or you can't sleep here tonight.
Wow.
Right. So I'm curious, like, what would you say to those conservative parents who honestly, and I'm not talking about the ones that are it's just hate and they're going to traumatize no matter what. Like, what would you say to those parents who really do love their kids, who really do want to have a relationship with them, but they have this weird theology that's standing in the way of that relationship? So
my dad actually gives really good advice on this.
That's great.
He tells all of his congregation and anybody who comes up to them with and they have a child struggling, or they say struggling.
They call it struggling, yeah.
With same-sex attraction. He says, love your child. and stay in relationship, because if you're not in relationship, you're not able to be an example. And so,
Right.
and that's another reason why I went back. If I'm not in relationship, I can't be an example of who I am.
Right.
And so stay in relationship, you stay true to your beliefs, but examine them.
Right.
And don't berate your children with it.
Yeah.
Just love your child and be an example. Lead by example, and let your child lead by example, and see what you can teach each other.
Yeah.
Another thing I would say is, if your pastor is telling you to disown your child
Yep.
or put your child through conversion therapy or do mean things or whatever it is, you should probably find another church.
That should be, as soon as a pastor tells you to do anything like that, that's your last day at that church.
That should be your last day at the church. Yeah. So, and I see a lot of these churches out there, and some of the advice that they're giving, it's heartbreaking.
Right.
And I just can't imagine a parent turning their back on a child.
Yeah.
That's not what my parents did.
Yeah.
I left after they read my diary,
Right.
and then we had a struggle.
Yeah.
I don't think would have ever kicked me out. Now, when I did come, so when my dad wrote me the letter, this is probably why I left. It did come with rules.
Okay.
And so, and those rules weren't really like conversion therapy, but I was living under their roof. And so, curfew and just different things. But I was 18 at the time. And so I was like, I don't need this,
Right,
And
I'm
so,
out.
yeah, I'm out. So it wasn't, you can't stay here if you don't go to conversion therapy, kind of thing. It was just more like, they did want to have a rein on me, but
Right.
it wasn't as bad as it could have been.
For sure.
But but it still was not an environment for me to stay in.
Right.
So.
Wow. That's helpful. I want to end there, but I also, if you have time, I'd love to offer people to have Q&A.
Yeah.
I'm going to change our little
do it. I'm going to
title
do a quick
here. Go ahead.
flip, because you got off camera here as my
Oh no.
computer.
Q&A with.
Sorry guys, I'm having what's it called? My charger is popping out of my camera there.
Okay.
So I can do a Q&A with the Instagram
Right.
live too, if there's anybody on Instagram on the 1946. Let's see if anybody has a question.
Yeah, go ahead. You guys can put those in the chat. If you're on 1946 Instagram, or if you're on Skeptic Pastor TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube, go ahead and put your questions in there for Sharon or I, and we'll do our best to answer those as they come up.
Yep.
I know it's always a little bit of a delay to go all the way to space and come back and all of the stuff. So I'll say, while we're waiting for people to actually hear us ask them to make questions and answers. So I have this community, and it's this weird little community. We call it Not Church. We call it Not Church because somebody said early on, it's like church. It's like a religious community. People who are interested in spirituality, they talk about spirituality. They also process their religious trauma, and they hold space for each other. Like somebody's going to the hospital, they say, like, I feel weird heart things. Would you hold space for me? And they post memes and whatever, talk about politics. But it's like church, except nobody's telling you you're going to hell because you've got tarot cards. Right? And I'll be honest, in the moment that we're in with the like incredible division in the world, I don't experience anywhere else what I experience there, where somebody who has like, we'll have somebody who is like basically part of a pagan stream of religion and somebody who is part of a more Christian stream of religion. And one person will post and something that is completely opposite of what the other person believes. But instead of an argument, they say, that's interesting.
Yeah.
How did you come to that? Like, how does that help you? And there's this like mutual respect and learning and like actual community and being there for each other that like I've never experienced, and I always wished that churches would be.
It sounds pretty healthy. It sounds, and honestly, there's a lot. I've been hearing that there are more groups like yours joining, or assembling, which is wonderful because you shouldn't be afraid to ask questions. And if you're in it, that's another thing. If you're in a place and you can't ask a question to your pastor, you should probably leave. I do have a question from somebody on here. They just want to know, what is the podcast? What's the name of your podcast?
It's called Unbelief.
Unbelief. And where can they find it?
They can, any of your podcast apps, Unbelief, just search. It's the only one called Unbelief.
And this is Skeptic Pastor. And
Skeptic Pastor.
I must say, so yesterday when we met, was it yesterday?
Yeah, it was yesterday.
At the World Pride screening for 1946, Jeremy was in line to say hi, and I looked at him and I'm like, I know you. And I'm like, but wait a minute, do I know you? And then it took me a second and I was like, oh, you're a skeptic, but also a pastor, and I'm a fan. Like, I really, and so I texted him.
I was like, I told my friend when I got back home, she knew who I was.
I have a group chat. It's called the World Domination Group of 1946 in Texas. It's like some donors in Texas that we have, and we've had this group chat for years. And one of my friends, Brian, always puts your things in the chat. And so it's like, guys, guess who I met? And they're like, who? And they're like, she said to guess, And I was like, a skeptic. Also a pastor, They were so excited. So I'm a bit of a fangirl. I love what you do. I think it's really important, and you do a really good job with it. So
thank you. If anybody wants to be part of that, we do this. It's patreon.com/skepticpastor, and it's $3 a month, because the Bible actually doesn't say that you should give 10% to the church. That's bullshit. If you want to read it, it's 22.5%, but also nobody's going to say that. So it's $3 a month. And if it doesn't work for you, you just stop. You just stop, and you've only paid $3. Yeah. Okay. So let me see. I'm looking for questions in the chat. Somebody joined late. How do they view the film?
So if you go to 1946themovie.com, you can find all the links to watch the film on either eventive.org, which is worldwide, or Amazon in the US and the UK. And next month we will be on Apple TV and YouTube worldwide. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah. And the other thing, though, what I love is you also have a way that people can sort of host a watch party or an event, because I think that a lot of people who hear about 1946, maybe they want to watch it themselves, but then there's like, oh wait, I want to support this in a way that I could bring people together, and we're gonna help fund the work. How do people do that?
So on the website as well, there's a button on the homepage that says book a watch party or book a conference, and all the information is in there. Okay. You can rent the film from Eventive, and then there's a suggested group rate. So if you have 50 people in the room, it's like $100. It's $2 a person, as opposed to, and all the money just goes to help continue to support the mission, our monthly bills and things like that. So it really makes a huge difference. It's an honor system, though. If you don't have the money and you you just rent the film and watch it, that's totally fine. But if you can rent the movie for, $2 a person at 50 people, it would be great to get the $100 rental, But then if you have a conference or you're doing a big event, you can obtain a license for the film through the Film Collaborative.
Oh, that's great.
It's a little bit more expensive, but that's where, you're doing a conference thing, or you're renting a theater, or you're selling tickets.
Yeah.
If you're selling tickets, then you can obtain a license from the Film Collaborative, then you can totally have an event where you sell tickets.
Right.
So all the information is on our website. And we would really appreciate it. As a matter of fact, when we first launched on Eventive has now done a case study on our film, because I was promoting these watch parties and trying to do an impact campaign, and also trying to pay back all our bills and things like that too.
Of course, yeah.
And we ended up doing 500 watch parties in 25 countries over 6 months, which is incredible. And so tomorrow I'm actually going to be teaching a course on how to build an audience prior to going
That's so cool.
to theaters, prior to going to the festivals and things like that. Impact films, which I've learned during this whole journey, do not get distribution anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And so we're going to be talking about that live tomorrow as well. And we'll have all of our, we have a whole, one of our teams put together a whole report with citing everything. So you can actually look at the data where, what's actually being sold and why these films aren't getting picked up by distributors, but then how to actually get it to the audience. So everything's on our Instagram, 1946, the movie. I just did a post about that live tomorrow. It's going to be 2 p.m. Eastern on May 29th. Right. So if you're watching this now, you can learn how I did it all tomorrow.
That's really great.
Yeah, it'll be recorded too, so I'm sure it'll be available somewhere.
And that will be in the DC area?
So
Or is it online?
It's online. Yeah,
Okay.
it's online, so you can watch it anywhere in the world.
Okay.
Yep. Link is
That's
in our
awesome.
bio.
Great. So do you have any other upcoming events? I know that like you're at World Pride right now. And that's where I saw that you were here, and I was like, I've got to go. Maybe she's going to also be here. I just saw that the showing was there at Alamo Cinema, right?
Yeah.
Alamo Draft House, which is great because you can get beer and popcorn,
Yeah.
whole deal. What other things do you have coming up?
So on June 3rd, we're going to be at London at UCL, which is the University College London, which is a big college in the UK. And after that, we're actually going to be at the Seattle Transgender Film Festival.
Right.
I need to put all that stuff. I should start putting. It's really hard for me to keep up, as you can imagine. And I do all the day-to-day stuff. So even like there are screenings and festivals that I don't even know going on.
Right.
We're going to be in St. Louis too this summer for June at a film festival. So let me see if I can get that stuff up in the next week. So other than that, really just people do local screenings at churches. I sometimes I put on my Google alerts whenever the movie is in the press, it comes up. So sometimes I learn about screenings that way too, and I'm like, it's really interesting. But it's great that people are still, that we got into World Pride and we're going to the Seattle Film Festival, and that'll be our third Seattle Film Festival,
Really?
and so people are still, and actually, when I was at the Cannes Film Festival, I met a programmer at the Paris International Film Festival. She wants to program the film. I met another programmer at the UK International Film Festival. He wants to program the film. So we're going to just keep doing festivals. And I also did put out for another grant. Last year we had a grant, and we also put our own money in to go on the road for an impact campaign. I'd love to do that again.
Right.
And all this just takes money for us to bring a team out, to go out, to be in person, to meet with the community. But it was amazing. We impacted 1,000 people in person and tens of thousands of people online.
Yeah.
Because now we've turned that into a podcast web series.
Yeah.
And we had people like Dan McClellan on the show,
Yeah.
and Lindsay Booker from Birmingham. She's Beeham Blue Dot. It was amazing,
She's
and so
great.
just working with different people. We worked with Free Mom Hugs and Mama Bears. It just helps to get the message out.
Right.
And then again, getting the film to the audience that needs it the most.
And what is that podcast called?
It's called 1946, The Culture Shift Tour. You can also find that on our website. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
Okay.
So you could watch it too. It's a web series or a podcast.
All right. I'm looking for any more questions in the chat. I'm not seeing any right now in these. Do you have any more in yours?
Somebody
Okay, great.
had a question about... first of all, I want to say shout out to Reverend Kenny Dickinson, who's on here right now. Kenny is my pastor buddy and my film buddy. We just spent the week together at the Cannes Film Festival.
Oh, that's
we met
great.
at the American Film Market, and I was talking about the movie, and it's always like you never know who's going to be like, and he's tapping me on the shoulder, and I was like, my movie's about, I love it. And I was like, okay, good,
That's great.
So now we're friends. Kenny's watching. I love it. Thank you, Kenny. Hello from Detroit. Wanted to ask if you're currently attend a church and or practicing Christian and how it's different from now. I used to, during this process, I actually did a lot of online church.
Okay.
I used to go to church in California. Then COVID happened.
Right.
I went back to New Jersey, and then I just started Zooming into the church. And I would Zoom into a whole bunch of different ones just to kind of like get a feel for what's going on, especially in the progressive Christian space, because I didn't even know affirming spaces existed.
Right.
So that was a really cool thing, going back to church and then realizing, oh, wait, there's this whole world out there that I didn't know about. And there's actually people doing social justice work, Another thing I used to do is watch my dad's sermons, because I like to torture myself, I think. But he's really sweet. He means well. He just is old-fashioned and dogmatic,
Yeah.
I don't really watch those anymore. It's a little hard to watch. Now I would say my church is this community, and every single day, just kind of like what you're doing, and learning from different people, learning from different scholars. Even, I know I mentioned Dan McClellan again, but just getting different perspectives of people, Pete Enns and things like that. The Bible for Normal People.
Yeah.
I love those kinds of expressions, and so that's the way that I do church.
Right.
Really,
That makes sense.
I did have another question. If you didn't have,
Yeah.
one.
Keep going.
Okay. Oh, and Kenny says, I'm a hoot. Hoo, hoo. Okay. Somebody said something about believers and skeptics, but I can't find it now. Like, shouldn't we all be skeptics? And I don't know why I can't see it now. But yes, I mean, right? I think that, and that's what we were talking about earlier. If you're in a place where you can't ask questions,
Right.
you're probably in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Asking questions is really healthy. And as a matter
Yeah.
of fact, we can learn from our Jewish brothers and sisters on this.
Right.
They reread the same text every year,
Yep.
same season every year, and they open a dialogue around it, and every year it changes.
Yeah.
Because as the seasons change, as the years change, as our culture changes, the conversations grow and evolve. And I think that that's something that we don't
Yeah.
learn in Christianity, and I welcome. So
Yeah. And what I say is, I think doubts and questions are a sign of spiritual health. And what people ask me all the time, like, how can you be a skeptic and a pastor? And I'm just like a skeptical person. I don't know about you, but like, I've always asked all kinds of very inappropriate questions according to the people that I'm around, right? Like, why does the Bible say 7 days and my science teacher says, evolution, right?
Right.
Big Bang, all of that stuff.
I think it's 6 days, Pastor. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you're not wrong, but yeah. So I think, but for me, being a skeptic means that you hold all of what you believe sort of with an open hand, right? And you're constantly looking for data and accepting new data and then evaluating it and saying like, well, for me, what I believe is like, I'm 100% sure that I'm wrong about at least half of what I believe. I just don't know which half.
Yeah.
Right. And so and there's stuff that I change. There's beliefs that I change when I find the data that supports something else. And the idea that like keeping in the front of your head, you could be wrong. And of course, it's like science. It's going to be hard to prove gravity wrong at this point. But so the more data you have, the harder it is to find some little piece that's going to shift everything. But that's healthy. And that's how you form beliefs. Or like what I try to say is like people need to choose beliefs that work for them. Because everybody's choosing beliefs. But a lot of people allow someone else to choose their beliefs for them, right? And so they've made a choice to outsource their beliefs and like they just let some random pastor tell them what to believe. But then like some other really person in authority says, you know what? There are these two words, arsenokoitai and malakoi, that were totally mistranslated. And you're like, wait, what the hell?
What? Yeah.
Right. And then you have to sort of unravel the whole thing when what we should be doing is like choosing the beliefs that help us become the best version of ourselves, find a purpose greater than ourselves, and experience some transcendence, right?
Well, it's funny, when I start my character in the film, I say I was always labeled as the troublemaker because I would question.
Yes.
But if I were born a boy, I probably
Of
would have been
course.
looked at as a leader.
Uh-huh.
And when I was 2 years old, my parents tell this story all the time. It's one of my favorite stories.
Uh-huh.
The deacon of my dad's church pulled my mother aside and said, "Oh, you're going to have trouble with this one."
Yeah.
And it's like, why?
Oh,
Because
wow.
I'm not going to take your authority of what you're telling me. And that's actually so dangerous, too.
Yeah, so
it's part of the
dangerous.
control, And again, my parents are good people. They don't see it that way. They're not looking at it that way, But I know that the good religion has been hijacked by bad by bad people.
Right.
And this is a form of control. And so I knew at an early age to question. And so, yeah, I'm the troublemaker.
Okay, we've got another question by a user called Seek Truth, Live Free. But they're asking, what is 1946? It's a little confusing. I can't just read it exactly as it's written, but basically, the importance of spirituality and religion evolving, right? What does it say to us about like the need for religion to not stay static and stuck in one time?
I mean, that's kind of, I guess, the stuff that we've been talking about this whole conversation, like how our beliefs change, our ideology changes, our understanding changes, which then changes our understanding of what we believe.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know if I'm really following how to answer that either.
Yeah, I think it's the idea that, like, as our understanding as humans evolve, like, religion should evolve too.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's part of the thing that, I don't know, I grew up in the evangelical world. There was this constant push to, like, oh, we need to get back to the way the first Christians practiced, right? We need to get back to the early church or whatever. When you're like, no, we can't try to, like, take, like, the sexual ethic of the first century, world and put it on today, because they bought their wives.
Right.
Like, that's not, like, you don't want a biblical marriage. Let's just be clear.
Exactly.
Right. And so, like, that's this, like, fallacy that, like, somehow returning to an earlier age is better than taking what we know now and allowing our faith and spirituality and understanding to evolve with our understanding of all the other things, like psychology and
absolutely
all of that.
As we know more, are we doing more? What are we doing with our, yes. And
right.
Kathy says that all the time. I do have another question on
Great.
here. Somebody wants to know what's a good online church. And I have a couple.
Great. Go ahead.
I would recommend Grace Point in Nashville.
No, that's good.
Josh Scott is the lead pastor there. I would also recommend New Abbey in California.
Okay.
That's Britt. I forget Britt's last name, and Corey are the lead pastors there. Mm-hmm. They're fantastic. New Abbey is in Glendale, California. Mm-hmm. I saw you have a Rob Bell book back here.
Oh my gosh.
One of my favorite pastors is a church. It's called, I used to go there all the time, and they just changed their location. Hold on one second. Let me pull it up. I'm having a blank right now. Central Avenue is the name of the church. Central Avenue. It's also in California. And the pastor there is wonderful. His name is Aaron. Mm-hmm. And Aaron talks a lot about Rob Bell. And there's another one, Peter, what's his name?
Oh, yeah, Peter. His book is up here. Pete Rollins.
Something like that,
right?
Yeah. But, just really, so Aaron welcomes the atheist. Aaron welcomes the skeptic.
Yeah.
And so it was the first time I ever went to a church. And actually, the first trailer that we cut back in 2019 was from a guy I met at this. Before I even went to the church, I met him online. I don't even know how. His name's Andrew, and he's like, I'm an atheist, and I go to this church called Central Avenue. I'm like, what are you doing going to church?
Right.
And we ended up taking a lunch, and he has a theology degree and loves talking theology, and we had the best time.
Yeah.
And so he ended up working on the first couple trailers. He was our first employee, pretty much.
I love that.
And so then I went to Central Avenue. So yeah, there's a lot of good churches out there. I'll try to see if I can think of any more and maybe do a post on it.
It's funny that you say that about atheists. Like, we've got in our not church community, we've got a couple of atheists, agnostics there, and a lot of people on social media will be familiar with Dan McClellan. Dan McClellan has a podcast called Data Over Dogma, and his co-host Dan Beecher is an atheist.
Yeah.
And he has an atheist podcast called Thank God I'm an Atheist. It's brilliant. But yeah, I find that even if people don't believe in God, they're often interested in spirituality and why people believe, and like there are ethical things, moral things, and community that happens. And when they can find a space that gives them space that's not a space where they're going to proselytize and feel like they're constantly being berated, where they can engage in community. Yeah. They're there
and
for
conversation.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. I loved going to that church, honestly. It was my favorite. And then I left California. And so, but that was the church I would probably online the most, the Central Avenue. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's actually where I got my cat, Ruben. I've had Ruben for 5 years now. It was during COVID, and the pastor's wife had this kitten on her lap, and I was like, what's that? And they had 3 of them, and I'm like, can I please have that kitten? So I ended up taking over the foster job of the 3 kittens, and then kept the 1 kitten, which I wanted to keep all of them, but I couldn't. I did tell my fiance, though, that one day I would like to foster 100 kittens, and I'm not kidding, honey.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well,
That's another
note,
story. Yeah.
On that note, thank you so much for doing this. And Sharon, I just can't tell you how much 1946 means to me, has meant to so many of my friends. There are people that I know that have felt, even though they've come out to themselves and live openly in the queer community, have felt imprisoned by the Bible translations that they were given when they were young and the way that people use the Bible, and have seen your film and have felt like it freed them.
Yeah.
To let go of some of that trauma and pain. And I can verify. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's 1946, the movie.
Yeah.
Amazon, and later Apple.
Yes.
And the world.
Yeah. Thank you again for everyone for all of your support. It really, we can't do it without you, honestly.
Yeah.
And all the support, even making the movie. When you watch the movie, my favorite part after the David part is the credits, where we get to honor every single person, from the volunteers to the paid technicians to all of the donors.
Yeah.
It's just such an amazing moment to see all of those names.
All the people involved in this.
The GoFundMe, we had about 1,000 people donate. So there's 1,700 donor names in the credits we counted.
That's so
it's
cool.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.